Hello and welcome to Uncensored Conservatism. This is episode number 370, and today I want to talk about the left and politics. So the first question I have is why the left is so against a photo ID for voting in person. Now, virtually every country in the world requires citizenship ID to vote in their elections. It's called election integrity. People on the left, especially after Trump's victory over Queen Hillary in 2016, blamed it on Russian interference in our elections. Well, first of all, countries interfere in other countries' elections all the time. The United States is guilty of it, as is Russia and China, or even Brazil. Foreign governments, like the United States government, have preferences in foreign elections, so there is that. Second, as for that 2016 Russian interference, it basically amounted to about $300,000 in social media ads in certain states. And if Russia did influence the 2016 election, and if they did prefer Donald Trump, which is a big if, and I doubt it, then they got a hell of a bang for the buck. Now, the left will tell you that the incidence of voter fraud is minuscule in this country. They'll also tell you that to the extent that it does exist, it makes no difference to the outcome. They usually back this up with statistics from the Brennan Center for Justice, which is a leftist think tank. What they don't tell you about are the instances where fraud occurred but were not prosecuted, or where it occurred and there were plea agreements. So listen, in my particular area where I live, there was an election and someone from the Democratic Party, surprise, surprise, was caught with absentee ballots he intended to drop off. The county moved to prosecute the guy, but he pleaded guilty to some lesser charge and was given a slap on the wrist. So in fact, I think he's still a Democratic operative. To the Brennan Center, that's not election fraud because there was no prosecution, there was no trial, and there's no guilty verdict. Of course, the Brennan Center conveniently forgets about that box of absentee ballots which were fraudulent. Now, I understand that it is impossible to provide photo ID for those states with no excuse absentee balloting or all mail-in ballots, but there certainly needs to be some proof of citizenship for ID beyond a photo, and it's usually a last four digits of your social security number or a TIN, a tax identification number, or something like that. In the 2020 elections, because of COVID and fear of a frickin' virus, many states instituted mail-in voting on an emergency basis. They didn't want people standing in line even 6 feet apart with face diapers on and a bottle of sanitizer in their hand because they feared the spread of the Wuhan flu. The problem is that states unfamiliar with all mail-in voting were unprepared. States like Oregon, Washington, and Colorado, they're familiar with the process, and we didn't see too many problems there. Where we saw problems were in key states, and I'll use Pennsylvania as an example. When Trump lost to Biden in 2020, he alleged voter fraud in Pennsylvania, among other states. Not a single one of his charges saw the light of day in court. No evidence for or against fraud was ever presented to a jury or a judge. Instead, the lawsuits were swatted away on procedural grounds. Now, Pennsylvania was essentially changing long-established voting laws on the fly. If a mail-in ballot was supposed to be postmarked on or before Election Day, that was the law. Instead, officials in courts allowed ballots to be counted after the postmark date, and some even without voter signatures or ID numbers. And the same thing happened in other states. In Wisconsin, officials found several ballots allegedly discarded into a ditch by a postal worker. Maybe it wouldn't have made a difference to the end result, but don't tell me voter fraud is not a reality in this country. The left tells us non-citizens can't vote in this country. Well, legally, they can, but they sure as hell know identity theft. And the deterrent against it is some signature on a voter registration form threatening a charge of perjury. So if a non-citizen wants to vote in this country, a few words on a form, a signature, and a threat, which is rarely acted upon, they don't give a rat's ass. They're going to do it. Look at that illegal school superintendent from Iowa who is a registered voter in Maryland and received absentee ballots. The leftist view is naive and, quite frankly, is stupid. As for in-person voting, their biggest complaint is that photo ID to vote disenfranchises minorities and the poor. First of all, it's racist. If you believe a minority who can open up a bank account or have the latest iPhone in their hand is too stupid to obtain a state-issued photo ID, you have a low opinion of minorities. There's no other way to put it. Yes, you need proof of citizenship to get the ID. And the residency part is easy. Show a utility bill or something. For citizenship, it's usually a birth certificate. Okay, well, minorities are not birthed in the backwoods of Alabama and never given a birth certificate. To use the left's line of thinking about, to the extent that it exists is minuscule, let's use it here. And if there is a poor black person from Alabama who lacks a birth certificate, their number is so minuscule that it really doesn't make a difference. And remember that big hullabaloo when Georgia passed their election laws requiring voter photo ID? That fat heifer Stacey Abrams declared that Jim Crow had descended on Georgia. Major League Baseball moved their All-Star game from Atlanta to Denver in protest. Curb Your Enthusiasm did a whole season around the issue. And then an election occurred. And you know what happened? Record black voter turnout. And then another election, and it beat the previous record for black voter turnout. And the same thing happened in Mississippi and in Alabama. Record black voter turnout with voter ID requirements. And basically, when it gets right down to it, the left likes to portray minorities, especially blacks, especially Southern blacks, as barefoot dipping their toes in the Mississippi River who talk like Uncle Remus. It's demeaning, it's racist. So let's just try voter ID in all states, and then let's look at the evidence on alleged suppression of the minority voter. Because we have examples out of Georgia, Mississippi, and Alabama that it does not suppress the minority voter. And I know states like California would never go for it because they likely count on illegal Hispanic aliens to get their preferred candidate over the finish line, just as they like to use them to bolster their population in the census. These illegals don't even know that they're being used by their Democratic overlords. As for places like Illinois, it's kind of hard to have an ID for a dead person, and dead people voting in Illinois is quite well documented. I mean, what's the left really afraid of here? An electoral loss or reality that counters their narrative? Now, recently, we've heard a lot about heated political rhetoric, and I'm referring specifically to the aftermath of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So let's look at that from two angles here. The first being the reaction, and let's compare those reactions to the killing of a fentanyl-taking, wife-beating black addict in Minneapolis 5 years ago. With the fentanyl Floyd incident, we got almost nightly riots, looting, and arson. The weird wife of the weird governor in weird Minnesota said she liked the smell of a burning city. Those mostly peaceful riots caused billions in damage, and several people were killed. City blocks were burnt and businesses were looted. So compare that to the death of Charlie Kirk, who had a greater contribution to humanity in his little finger than George Floyd had in his overweight body and his thick fucking lips. Yet what was the reaction? Did people on the right go out and rampage through the cities? Did anybody call for retribution? Kirk's own wife publicly forgave his killer. There were no riots, there was no looting, there was no violence of any kind. There were candlelight vigils, sometimes attacked by scum on the left, and there was a huge memorial service in Arizona. And that's about it. Now, some of the left did extend their condolences to Erica Kirk and her family, and they did decry the heated political rhetoric. But there is a caveat to many of those comments, and I just used one. You always have to be careful of what comes out of the words of anyone on the left or any Democrat, but I repeat myself. They'll say, well, of course I condemn political violence of any kind. We have to tone down the rhetoric. And then comes the but. And when they don't say but, they said, that said, where they will blame the death of a conservative activist at the feet of conservatives. So listen, when Joe Biden was recently diagnosed with a form of aggressive cancer, the right expressed sorrow and wished him well. Nobody said afterwards, well, ain't karma a bitch? Or couldn't have happened to a nicer guy, or anything like that. We could have, because there's a lot to hate about Joe Biden, more than there is to hate about Charlie Kirk. It may not have been heartfelt. or sincere, and most importantly, we never followed it with a but. So when you hear they say that it comes from both sides, be careful of the but afterwards. Another political issue I have is with this gerrymandering thing. Well, guess what? Political gerrymandering for political purposes for partisan advantage has been around since the first fucking census in the 18th century. It's in the fucking term. It's named after Massachusetts politician Elbridge Gerry. If you look at the historical record on this, his district, which was drawn to thwart his political success, looks suspiciously like districts drawn in North Carolina in the past, or in Illinois today, or even in Texas for that matter. So Texas, because they can, in their law, redrew the congressional districts in the state to gain a political partisan advantage. I mean, no secret about it. I believe Missouri did it also, mainly targeting one of their two Democratic congressmen, that dude in Kansas City. In other states, just because of their partisan nature, there's not too much a Democrat or a Republican can do. And I'm surprised they found a district in Missouri. But getting back to Texas, let's look at the reaction. In California, even though they have no provision to redraw their districts, and even if they did, it's done by a commission, not their legislature, and not their governor, who's running for president in 2028. The governor, Newsom, out there wants a one-time exemption. Forget about what the voters established when they agreed to that commission many years ago. And then they have the gall to say that what was done in Texas is a threat to democracy, while there in California, they're trying to overcome the actual will of the people through direct democracy, a referendum that establishes the commission. I mean, you can't make this shit up. Regardless, the Supreme Court has on numerous occasions and in various contexts said that partisan political gerrymandering is allowed under the Constitution as long as it does not violate some state constitutional provision or law. Time, places, and manners of elections are left to the states. Now, the one area where you cannot gerrymander is with race, but that's because of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. But even here, I have a little problem. Now, yes, of course, in the South, districts were previously drawn that diluted the vote of black people, and the Voting Rights Act addressed that, allowing the Justice Department to intervene. Fortunately, the Jim Crow South of 1965 is a thing of the past, and we cannot dictate that reality on the actual reality of the states in 2025. A lot has changed in 60 years. At a place I used to work, we had a black patron who was originally from Mississippi, and I sort of grimaced when he told me he was from Mississippi because he was black. And he kind of knew what I was talking about. He just told me, no. Of course, there's racists in Mississippi, but they're nothing compared to the number of racists he encountered in New Jersey, a liberal northeastern state. And that's the new reality. And this goes back to the basic racist mindset of the left, where every southern state, whites are racist and blacks are stupid, oppressed people. But it occurred to me that under the Voting Rights Act of 1965, districts that were the majority of voters are minorities, that is absolutely allowed. The underlying premise is that these voters should be given a choice of the preferred candidates for a political office. This further assumes that a black voter will automatically vote for a black person. Again, these assumptions are based on racial stereotypes that, dare I say, are racist. Okay, first of all, maybe in the past cracking black areas into different districts to dilute the black vote was a thing, but is it today? In the lawsuit against the new Texas map, since they can't get them on partisan gerrymandering because, it's allowed and the legislature says that's why they're doing it, that's their complaint. It's racial. They broke up largely either black or Hispanic districts, making it easier for a Republican, one assumes a white Republican, to win under the new map. But what if a black or Hispanic Republican is a candidate? They do exist after all. Then what's their excuse? And this is the political equivalent of the chicken or the egg dilemma. There are some areas of Texas, for example, where there will always be a Democrat elected, just as there is in Ohio. In any major city where there is a large minority population, it is damn well near impossible not to have a minority-majority district. It's a function of population shifts and the natural sorting of the population. There's a reason you won't find a Cracker Barrel restaurant in the Bronx, and there's a reason Home Depot places stores where they do. Likewise, you're not likely to find Whole Foods grocery store in central Kansas. It's called The Great Sort, and there's even a book called that, which explains a lot and should be required reading. Now, congressional districts have to be roughly equal in population. In a country of 350 million people, that's roughly 805,000 people per congressional district. There are 17 cities with greater than 805,000 people in the United States, so they obviously have to be carved up. Now, let's just take the example of Los Angeles. It has a population of 3.8 million people. Hence, it should have 4 or 5 congressional districts. But when you look at it in reality, it is actually divided into 8 or 9 districts. So why is that? Well, LA is a liberal city and high in a minority population, while some of the surrounding areas are not. By splitting LA into several districts and combining them with perhaps less minority or more conservative outlying areas, you actually dilute the voices of those areas. So California and Governor Newsom can go eat shit when it comes to gerrymandering. Illinois, 9 of their 17 congressional districts are in Chicago or the immediate suburbs. Theoretically, they should have no more than 4 congressional districts. Why? Because they carved up pieces of the more liberal Chicago and extended the lines into more conservative suburbs of Chicago. 53% of their congressional districts are in the Chicago area, while only 21% of the population of Illinois lives in Chicago itself. A non-gerrymandered Illinois map could conceivably divide Chicago into 4 quadrants and then take it from there. The bottom line is, I don't want to hear shit from the left about threats to democracy and all the whining about Texas. We live in a constitutional republic, not a direct democracy, and for a reason. Our form of government is designed to protect the minority views. It's the same with the misnamed filibuster in the Senate. It's not a filibuster. It's called cloture to end debate. And why does the Senate have the rule? To protect the views of the minority party. It makes a whole world of difference if the Senate is 51 to 49 or 59 to 41, one way or the other. So when it comes to legislation that affects an entire country, yes, the Senate rule should remain. And to those conservatives and Republicans out there yelling to abolish the rules simply because Donald Trump is the president and to push a MAGA agenda, you'd best be reminded of the ebb and flow of politics. You may be in the majority one year and in the minority 2 years later. And that's it. Have a great day and a more pleasant tomorrow.